Welcome back to Hold Fast, a podcast where we have biblical truths for daily battles. My name is Kenny. I'm the host of the podcast, and something that you may have noticed about this podcast that I was thinking about just the other day, that I think separates it from some of the other podcasts out there, is that I try my best not to have much like banter, if you will, at the beginning of a podcast. A lot of the ones that I listen to, you can skip like 6 to 10 minutes ahead of every episode that you start to get to the real content of the episode. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there can be good reasons to do that, but I try my best to just get right to it. And so with that said, let's get into today's episode. The question that is really the title of the episode is, should I join a small group at church? Now, here at MissionWay Church, we have recently launched 2 new home discipleship groups. So we don't necessarily call them small groups at our church. You can call them that if you want, but the term that we use is discipleship groups. And that is an umbrella term that references not only these home groups that we are launching, but it references the men's and women's groups that meet throughout the week at MissionWay Church. It references the adult Sunday school class that happens twice a month. It references the youth Sunday Bible study that happens twice a month. It is kind of an umbrella term for groups that have as their goal discipleship at the church. And so you can call them small groups, that's fine, but that is the term that we use. And this episode would be for you, whether or not you're a part of MissionWay Church, because I think that there are many churches out there. I don't think it's a stretch to say that most churches out there have some form of groups ministry. They may call it a bunch of different things, but they have some form of Bible studies or groups that meet outside of Sunday mornings that are kind of a consistent group of people that get together to study the Bible, to pray, to encourage one another, to, many churches use the term, do life together, which is kind of something that has almost become a throwaway term. But I do think that phrase can have significant meaning when you apply it to the proper context. But this is a question that I think is good to ask if you are at a church that does groups in some way or something of that sort. Or maybe your church doesn't really do anything like this, but is considering doing something like this. Or maybe you would say, man, our church doesn't formally have groups, but I would love to form a group of people that do something like what a small group or a discipleship group is about to be. I hope this episode will be not only encouraging to you, but practical for you as you consider whether or not this is something that you want to or should give your time to. Let's begin by saying joining a small group, a discipleship group, doesn't automatically make you a superior Christian, okay? I say that because I don't want anybody to walk away from this episode, if you're not a part of something like this right now, to think that I want you to believe you're less of a Christian. That's not the goal of this. I do believe that a lot of what the New Testament teaches about true Christian fellowship and community can be accomplished well within a group, but it doesn't have to be in a group. Groups are simply a tool to help us accomplish biblical discipleship and fellowship together. I think they're a great tool, but they're not the only tool. They're not even always the best tool in every context. So I want to acknowledge that up front and just let everybody breathe easy. That being said, this is something that at MissionWay we are trying to prioritize because we think it's a good thing. We think it's a good tool. My hope as the pastor of MissionWay Church is that the majority, most of the people at MissionWay are involved in a group in some way. That doesn't mean that you somehow are thought less of if you can't. There are seasons of life where it's harder. Sometimes there are seasons of life where it's impossible. So again, just take everything with that as an introduction that I'm going to say in this episode, understanding that I know there are exceptions and there are times that this is just not best for people. But I think as a general rule here at MissionWay, this is something we believe is a good thing. This is something we desire for our people to be a part of. So that's just kind of the backdrop of everything that I want to say in this episode. With that said, at the outset, let's talk about what a discipleship group is. And for this portion, I'm going to specifically be referring to the context of MissionWay. I think groups in general have a lot of these same principles across the board at different churches. Some of this may not be true, though, of other local churches, but this is, generally speaking, what we are aiming for at MissionWay. And don't think of these as rules for groups as much as guidelines. I mean, some of them are borderline rules, I guess, but these are guidelines. This is like, when we say discipleship groups, what are we talking about? Like, what happens at discipleship groups? What should I expect? So these are some things. it should be a smaller group of people. I would say as low as 3 to 4. And what I've often said, especially in our Discover Mission Way class, is that if it's just you and your spouse, you're not a discipleship group. That's a marriage. But so I say 3 for that reason. Like you want to at least have another household, another family, another person who's not your spouse represented in that group. But it can be as high as 15 to 20. That's a little bit of an arbitrary number. Again, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I tend to think once you get past 20 people, you've gotten to a point that it's a little bit harder to accomplish some of the things that you're trying to do with a discipleship group. So if a group at MissionWay gets to 20 plus people, we would begin to encourage them to expand and to grow, to like not split off. That's a bad term, but just have another group, like form another home group, another opportunity for more people in the church to connect out of that mass of people that you have in your group. And that leads to something else that I think is worth saying, that many people in churches today view a small group as a group of people that, like, these have to be my people for the next 20 to 30 years. Like, I can't go to another small group. I can't be a part of any other group of people. And I think that that's a limiting mindset. It is great when you have small groups that consistently have the same group of people for many, many years. You know each other well. You become really, really close. But I don't think you have to always stay in the same small group. You might build some relationships with people within your small group that last, whether or not that particular group continues to go on. So that's just a few things on that I wanted to make sure and state, because I think that sometimes we have a misunderstanding about what it means to even be a part of a small group. I think a discipleship group should regularly meet together. I would define that as at least once per month. I don't think once per month is even necessarily best. There are times and seasons and different groups of people where that may be what needs to happen, and that's okay. But I think anything less than that, for sure, you just don't have the consistency. It's going to be easy for people to not prioritize it, for it to kind of drop off. And so I would aim for either bi-weekly or weekly. And that, people ask me, like, what's better, weekly or bi-weekly? And I would say that depends on the people in your group. There are a lot of factors that can go into that. I don't think there's a right or wrong decision on that by any means. But I think that you should talk with your group openly and honestly, talk about the pros and cons, and make a decision that you think works best for your group. Discipleship groups obviously should meet for discipleship, and that would include praying together. I think that a group should pray together often. You should pray for the requests within the group. You should pray for your church. You should pray for events happening around the world and in your city that are affecting you. You should pray for the kids in your group if you have them. You should pray together as a group. You should study the Bible together. That doesn't mean you can't get certain Christian books that are biblically based. I think that's a good thing too. But I think we should study the Bible together. I think there should be a very heavy diet of Bible study in a group. Doesn't mean that every time you get together, you have to open the Bible and have an hour-long discussion about it. Maybe there are times, especially, and I'm speaking from my own experience of being in groups where there were a lot of younger families with younger kids, specifically babies. In that context, it's going to be difficult, especially with toddlers too, to have a 30-minute discussion about the Bible, right? And there are different ways you can try to, structure the group to make sure that that is conducive for that. But you might only get 5 minutes of discussion some weeks. That's okay. Let the interruptions happen. You are sharing life together. I think of it similarly to family worship in my own household. There are times that we take longer for family worship than others. There are times that I realize this is going nowhere and I need to stop it. Now, sometimes in my stubbornness, I realize it's going nowhere and I still try to force it and it doesn't go well. And I think the same thing is true in the context of a group as well. So while we should prioritize Bible study, let's give ourselves grace and understand that not every single time has to be an hour-long theological discussion or debate. And in a discipleship group, I think that the conversation should focus pretty heavily on application. We should study the Bible accurately. We should talk about theology. We should grow in an understanding of these things and talk about them rightly. But I think groups are a great place to take the Sunday sermon, for example, which may be heavy on content and theology and have some application, and to then more specifically apply that sermon to, or that text to your lives as a group. Discipleship includes encouragement. You should encourage one another. You should find ways to build one another up. You share life together. People say, do life together. You are showing up, I would say, especially in the home groups, you're showing up within the context of people's homes. You're seeing their life a little bit more up close, which is another point. I think meeting in homes creates intimacy that is hard to find in other contexts. That's a good thing. And I think that that is a great tool for discipleship. I think the last element of discipleship I want to focus on that should happen within groups is you should find ways to serve together. Find out ways that you as a group can serve within the context of your local church. You can do it outside of the church as well, but your church probably has ways that they would love to have discipleship groups come in and offer their time, their talents, their treasures for the sake of the ministry there. Groups should meet and operate within the context and calendar and life of the church, of MissionWay Church, in my example. And what I mean by that is you need to make sure that you organize your group in such a way that it's not a hindrance to things happening within the larger context of the church. It's not this separate entity by itself. It's an extension of the church, and it needs to be treated as such. It needs to be led by a discipleship group leader who let me maybe help you with this, because I think when people think of a group leader, they think I need to be like a pastor. Like I need to be somebody who has all this knowledge and all this ability to lead this rich discussion. And that's great if you have that. I mean, that's definitely useful. But you also can go the other extreme to think, you know what, the only thing I need to be able to do to be a group leader is be able to, I've heard this before, the only thing I need to do is be able to put a DVD in a player and play a video, and that's it. Not necessarily. I do think that a group leader should be somebody who is able to guide discussion. You may not be somebody who has all the answers, and none of us do. You may not be somebody who feels adequately equipped to really lead a robust discussion, but that's okay to an extent. You may just be somebody who really is able to guide the conversation, and somebody who's able to lead it in such a way that if it gets out of hand or it gets to a place where you think, man, we need some help, that you're able to guide the group in that direction. So there's some training, and there is some spiritual maturity that has to be there for a discipleship group leader. But don't overthink it and don't underthink it either. Hopefully that makes sense. And that group leader is ultimately accountable to the elders of the church. That, again, that's here in the context of MissionWay. The elders are going to be the ones to approve certain books and studies that different groups want to do. The elders are going to be the ones who should step in if there's disunity and contention and strife within a group, or if there's false teaching within a group. That's not happening in the context of MissionWay Church, but were that to happen, the elders have a responsibility to step in and to shepherd and lead in that context. I think that groups can consist of people in similar ages and stages of life, but also can be full of people from all stages of life. I love multi-generational groups where older Christians, more mature Christians are pouring into younger Christians, and the younger Christians are encouraging and spurring on the more mature Christians as well. I think that's a great thing. This is not a one is better than the other type thing. I love to see a mix of this. I love to see some groups where you got a bunch of young families together or a bunch of retired people together. They have similar life experiences. They can encourage and help one another. But I also love to see multi-generational groups as well. I think those are all good things. Groups should seek at MissionWay to help one another gather, connect, grow, and go. That's our strategy at MissionWay. We want people to gather. We want people to really connect to the life of the church, connect to one another in deep fellowship and discipleship. We want them to grow in these things, and then we want them to go out as bold witnesses with the gospel, speaking the truth in love wherever it is that they go. And then finally, groups should be guided by the mission, values, and for us at MissionWay, the marks of an everyday disciple, which are being faithful followers, intentional disciple makers, bold witnesses, and sacrificial givers. That should be the goal of the people within the group. You should strive to help one another be those things. You should align with the values and the mission of your church, wherever it is that you are at. So those are just some kind of guidelines as to this is what a group is, and that's the thing that we're aiming for at MissionWay. And finally, I want to answer the question as we get to the latter part of this episode: why should I join a group? And I think I've already given some reasons that you've picked up on throughout the episode, but let me explicitly state why you should join a group. I think that it is harder to not be known, loved, and cared for within a smaller group of Christians that are regularly meeting together. It's easy if you just show up on Sunday mornings to just slide in and slide out. Nobody really knows who you are, knows much about you, even if they know your name. It's easier to do that. It is harder to do that in a smaller context. It's harder to fall through the cracks, and I think that's a good thing. It is harder to just sit in the chair and not be involved. If you're somebody who shows up to Sunday morning, you can just show up, sit down, listen to the sermon, and leave, not serve, not give, not do any of these other things, and nobody really notices. I mean, the staff and elders and pastors of the church should notice that, right? But it's easier to do that on just a Sunday morning. It's harder to do that within the context of a small group. I think that's good. That's good accountability. That's good encouragement. That's something that pushes you on to be a more faithful follower of Christ. This has been said throughout, but small groups are a great place to foster true community. It doesn't mean that just because you have a small group, you're going to have true community. That's not automatic, but I think it's easier. I think it's that context is a little bit more conducive to really generating true community. It's a little bit harder to do that on Sunday mornings with a bigger group of people. Not impossible, but a little bit harder. And I think groups give us a good context for that. I think being in a group forces you into a rhythm of prioritizing and valuing Christian community during the week. Being in a group is this next thing on your calendar beyond Sunday morning that forces you to say, we've got to organize our life around the life of our church. We've got to organize our life around fellowship and discipleship with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm going to say a little bit more on that at the very end of the episode. I think being in a group can help you out of your comfort zone. I have seen people start coming to a group and say, listen, I don't pray out loud in front of people. It's just not my thing. And then, 6 months or a year into it, that person is like leading the prayer in the group. And that's just an example. I'm not saying that has to be something you do, but that's an example of ways that a group can push you out of your comfort zone. I think a group is a great place to find a Paul, Timothy, or Barnabas, something we talk a lot about at MissionWay. Paul is somebody who is more mature in the faith that can pour into you. Timothy is somebody who may be a little bit less mature in the faith that you can pour into. And a Barnabas is somebody who comes alongside of you to encourage one another and sharpen each other as iron sharpens iron. Don't get so hung up on like the specific categories of who's my Paul, who's my Timothy, who's my Barnabas. What we're really aiming for here is saying, who in your life is discipling you? Who are you discipling? Who's pouring into you? Who are you pouring into? Who's somebody in your life that you have an intentional discipleship relationship with? That's maybe a simple way to ask it. And I think a small group is a great place to find that. It's a little bit harder on Sunday mornings where you have less intimate conversations and fellowship with people. In a small group, you get to know people a little bit better. You see their life a little bit more up close, and you can identify those people and start that relationship even outside of the context of that specific small group. And I think that's a good thing as well. The next thing I think being in a discipleship group does, specifically a discipleship group that meets in a home, and I've hinted at this already, but homes carry a kind of intimacy that is hard to replicate elsewhere. I think we've experienced this. You have another person or another family in your church that you go out to lunch with after church. And so you go to somewhere like Chipotle or Cava or whatever, and you have good conversation. But there's distractions there. There are things that sort of get in the way of that. And then you meet that same person or that same family in a home, and I think there's more intimacy there. I think the conversation goes deeper. I think you share more life there in that kind of context. And I think that's a good thing. I think we need more of that in our churches, more people in one another's homes, sharing life together, having that intimate discipleship and fellowship that occurs in that context. It's going to help. Being in a small group, a discipleship group, is going to help you build relationships far beyond the quick, how you doing on Sunday mornings. We need that. We need more of that. We need less surface level. We need more true Christian love, intimacy, discipleship, and fellowship with one another. If you are a parent of young children, it can give your kids a chance to be around other Christian kids, other children their age or around their age. That's good fellowship for them. That's good experience for them. They need more of that. I want that for my kids, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it is good to find that within the context of a smaller group where they're going to see one another often. They're going to, in some ways, maybe grow up together. I love that, and I want to see more of that in our churches and in my own family's life as well. Small group, discipleship group is a place where multiple generations can come, encourage one another, and model biblical discipleship. It's a place where the Sunday sermon continues to have an impact. So here at MissionWay, we recently launched, and by recently I mean this past Sunday was the first time, we attached a discussion guide to the sermon. If you go to the MissionWay mobile app or even to the website on the sermons page, under each sermon starting this past Sunday, you're going to see a link to a discussion guide. That can be used within your small group context. That can be used for your family worship throughout the week. It can be used for your own personal reflection. It's just a guide to go a little bit deeper with the sermon. I think discipleship groups are a great context to not just show up, hear a sermon, and then forget about it, but to really allow that text, that sermon to just dwell in your hearts and your minds and lead to application. And that's just a good thing, obviously, or I would hope that it is a good thing. So let me close by issuing a challenge, because maybe you get to this point in the episode and you say, yeah, that all sounds good, but my life's just too busy. That is maybe the top response, the top reason that people give for not being involved in a discipleship group or a small group. So let me close by issuing you a challenge. What are you doing to ensure that your church is your family, your spiritual family? What are you doing to ensure that your church is your family? We say that we value authentic community at MissionWay because we are a family seeking to transform members and their families. We're a family. What are you doing to ensure that your church is your family? People often say, I value community. I value relationships within my church. So what are you doing to foster that? That might be an overwhelming question for you to think about. But can I say to you that making the intentional decision to be a part of a discipleship group can be a great step towards you fostering community at your church? I think it can be. Again, none of this makes you a better Christian. Please don't hear me say any of that. But this is a great step you can take. What are you willing to give up, or maybe unwilling to give up, in order to have deeper fellowship? As you look at your calendar, Go on the MissionWay website, or if you're a part of another church, go to your church's information, wherever you can find it about groups. Look at when the different groups meet and look at your calendar and ask, what would I have to give up to be a part of this? Am I willing to give that up? Am I willing to sacrifice that to work towards deeper discipleship and fellowship at my church? Maybe you say, listen, I honestly don't know if this will work in the rhythm and flow of my life. We're in a season right now that's uniquely difficult. I understand that. Would you be willing to try it for like 8 to 12 weeks? Just make the decision, do the hard thing and say, let's try this and see what happens here, and really commit to it. Really give yourself to it and see what happens. Maybe it's not the right time for that. I understand that. But what are you doing to ensure that your church is your family? What are you doing to foster authentic community within your church? What are you doing to help one another to be a faithful follower of Christ, to be an intentional disciple maker? What are you doing to equip the people at your church to reach the lost, strengthen the weak, and encourage the faithful with the gospel? That's the challenge I want to close with. If you are a part of MissionWay, you can go to our missionwaychurch.org website, and you can find the discipleship groups page. I believe there's also a link to that in the MissionWay mobile app. Look at the groups. Look at the 2 new ones, the 2 new home groups that we launched. They are looking for more people to be a part of those. Figure out where you can fit this in. Not just fit this in, but be intentional. Place this as something that is important on your calendar, something you say, we're not going to miss this. This is meaningful to us. This is important to us. We're going to prioritize this. We're going to make sure that we are doing everything we can to foster discipleship and community at our church. If you've got questions about the groups in MissionWay or just thoughts on this topic in general, feel free to email me at kennyroberts@missionwaychurch.org. Would love to hear from you. We at MissionWay are going to continue to strive to have more groups, more opportunities for people to be involved in this. If you want to talk to me about leading a group or starting a group, but you're not sure how to do that, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about that. There are many ways we can help you and come alongside of you in that effort as well. Thanks as always for listening to Hold Fast. I pray this was encouraging and something that is applicable to you and helpful to you and practical for you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and Lord willing, I'll be back next week with another episode. God bless.